I am still covered, aren't I? Right, I was supposed to do that. Every week is something, right? Hi, this is Shellyanne. How are you doing? Shellyanne Edwards Barron, your creative writing specialist. And today we are on episode 17 of Journey to SEA 2025. Thank you so much for joining me. For those of you who can join me live, if you're looking at the replay or the recording, thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to check in. So, just a quick reminder about who I am for those of you who are joining for the first time. And I am a creative writing specialist because I look at writing from multiple different perspectives. So I believe that everyone can learn to write well. And in doing that, especially with children, we would need to make the writing as interesting and interactive as possible, especially to target those kids who believe they can't write or they have, low attention span. Maybe they have challenges like ADHD and they're really having a hard time writing. What I do is incorporate something called multisensory learning in the teaching of creative writing. So we do experiments and drama and artwork and games and lots of different things while we're looking at the various concepts. And so this program, Journey to SEA 2025, what I'm doing is sharing a little bit of information on how you can incorporate some of those things in your support of your child or your students as they learn about the creative writing. So we're going to be looking at reports, narratives, and comprehension. And so before let me before we get into that, let me get my sharing up. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, every week I have a little trouble with something. Ah, I got it. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm so excited for lots of things today because one, I started at 11. I was up and ready and going at 11. And yes, well, over the weekend and last week, I got some really amazing feedback from parents, one parent in particular, about the sessions that we had this week. So, all right. So let me go back. What we're covering today is report paragraph one, beginning narratives one. So pretty much the introductions for reports and narratives. And then I want to talk a little bit about words and meaning. So we're looking at context because this is one of the areas that I know students struggle with when it comes to the comprehension and all of the comprehension um, texts and sections, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and even graphics, you can get vocabulary questions in those. So I want to take a look at that this week, today, and give you a few guidelines about how you can work with that. All right. Courses, before I get into it, the narrative drills, I have just a couple more spaces left in those. For some reason, comprehension is pretty much open, so I have some space in the comprehension. If it is you looking for a specific class, that actually starts today, this evening at 6:30. So if you're interested in sitting in the class to see if it will work for you online, send me a message. My WhatsApp number is on screen, 7174993, and you can sit in the class and then decide afterward if you want to continue. Um, Narrative, standard four narratives, we're beginning today. Really small class, and I'm always happy for small classes. All my classes, I don't go beyond 8 students, but I usually average like 4 to 6, because the smaller the classes, the more individual attention the students get. And so I really do try to keep the classes small, but I do want to take at least 6 students this term. So if you know someone who is looking for a narrative class and report as well, because we're doing reports on Thursdays, but the narrative class is starting today. Um, The feedback, if you already think you have everything sorted and all you want to get is some feedback on your child's writing, you can reach out to me. I'm doing two options, one for 150, which I give you detailed feedback on two essays. So ideally, you would want to send like one report and one narrative. And the other option is that I also include a 45-minute interaction where you can get after I send you the feedback, we can discuss it and I can give you further guidelines on implementing the feedback. And that's I could meet with the child or the parent, whichever you want to work with, that's fine. And that one would be $200. So message me if all you want is feedback and you think you have everything sorted out, but you want that professional, detailed feedback for improvement, let me know. And so I am, like I said, I'm so excited. First week of classes, I feel like I am at my best when I'm structured and I have classes going on. And so that is just me, meeting all the kids and having all the introductions and all those great things happening this week. But it's not too late to join with the standard force because first class is today for narratives, on Thursdays for reports, comprehension, first class today, and the standard 5 drill class. I'm closing off the Sunday class, but the Thursday class can take maybe one or two more students. So message me if you're interested in those. If you're just here for the lives, let me get into that because um, we have some things to cover today. And I'm also proud of myself. I did the slides, so hopefully you'd be able to follow along because I really do believe in the multisensory learning thing that I spoke about. And so it's not just about hearing my voice, it's also seeing things happening on the screen as well. And this is what I do with my students because I believe it's important to really engage. So, report writing introductions. If you're new to the lives, the way we do it is reports first, then narratives, then comprehension, and after I do each section, I give you some guidelines of what you want to cover during the week and the different topics to, further into today's session. And what I'm going to start doing from now on is to let you know what resources I have that could support those sessions that you're doing, whether they're free or those that you would have to pay for. Today, I'm talking mostly about the paid for ones because a lot of the information that you need would already be in this live, which you could go back to as you need. So, report introductions. What's in paragraph one? Now, you know that we're working with the 5 paragraph report structure. So, the introduction is paragraph one. Now, paragraph one, we all know, and if you know anything about reports, if you don't know about reports, this might be news to you, but in reports, we know that we have to answer the questions: who was involved, what happened, where it happened, and when it happened. Now, what many people don't often think about is, aside from answering those questions, what is the purpose of an introduction for a report? And do you need to state who the report is going to? That comes up kind of often, actually. Some teachers say yes, some teachers say no. What exactly is the situation? I'll answer that question in a little bit. And are all introductions formatted the same? That's a question that I think you need to think about as well. The We are working with also 5 different types of reports, generally speaking. We have the incident, accident, competition, activity, and event. And so, if you're not familiar with all these different sections, you can go back to earlier episodes where I really went into the descriptions and what actually each one would be about, how a student would recognize which one they're working with. Previous videos already dealt with that. What we're looking at now is, are all introductions formatted the same, and if they all should be. So let's answer those questions. The first is the issue of answering that questions of who, what, where, and when. We know those details should be in the introduction. The area that I see students struggling with the most is identifying the what. It might sound strange, but students sometimes don't know how to write that what actually happened in a short phrase. Sometimes they might give like a whole long sentence. Sometimes they might miss the what and give you something else because they're not sure what the report is actually going to be about. So that is something that you really need to focus on. What happened, and can the student write what the prompt indicates as what happened? Can they write that in 3 to 5 words? Let's say, let me go with two to four words because you want it in a really short phrase, right? Because it has to fit within a sentence. And so that is something that you want to look at when you're analyzing prompts. And we're going to review that again and again because it's that critically important. When you analyze a prompt, can the child, when the child analyzes a prompt, can they say what happened or write what happened in, let's say, 3, 4 words? Right? Does it need to be a little more? Maybe sometimes. Can it be written in 3 words or less? Maybe. But you really want them to be able to write it in a phrase, and that's something to pay attention to. So, the purpose of paragraph 1 is to give headline details. So, save report purpose for paragraph 2. And the reason I'm saying that is because sometimes in certain types of reports, like events and activities, there is a purpose. There's a reason for the event and there's a reason for the activity. That information is kind of considered a specific detail and can be discussed in paragraph 2. It actually gives students something to put in paragraph 2 that would make their paragraph 2 more robust. Your introduction could be as short as 3 sentences, and I'm saying 3 because I know I've seen students write everything in one sentence. Now, technically, the sentence is grammatically correct and we have the correct punctuation, but we also have to think about our audience. How is the audience going to be reading this? And so we want to think about not giving them all at once in one sentence. Break it up into 3 manageable sentences, and that way you can start building and maintaining your formal tone right from the introduction. And so you're focusing on the who, what, where, and when, and the why, which is purpose. Save that for paragraph 2 to give your paragraph 2 some substance. All right. So think of that paragraph 1 like a summary, is what I usually call it. It's like a headline, giving the details. That first sentence is a headline kind of thing. And that's what we want to aim for. Is it necessary to say who you're writing the report to? No, it's not absolutely necessary. And for a long time, I used to tell students, don't put it. But I realized that some teachers absolutely insist on having a statement like, this report is being submitted to, or this report is submitted to Mr. whoever, principal of the institution, or standard 5 teacher, whatever the case is. If it's there and worded correctly, it's not going to give you any more marks. If it's not there, you're not going to lose marks. So think about whether it's really needed. Some students need that kind of structure so that they can have that formal tone, and by writing that in, they would help, it will help them kind of feel the tone and the formality of the report, but it's not going to add or take away marks. It's not necessary. So is it necessary? No. Do you want to include it? It depends. For some time I used to say, no, don't include it. You're just wasting time, etc., etc. But I've seen where it can actually help students um, like feel the formality of the report, and that kind of helps them set the tone for the rest of the report. So if it's something that helps your child or your student, definitely keep it. If you think it's neither here nor there, it doesn't make much of a difference, leave it out. And so the last question I asked earlier was, about the type of report and are all introductions the same? So, no, not all introductions are the same. Your narrative, I'm saying narrative, sorry. Your accident and incident introductions tend to fall along similar lines. Activities and events are different, but they're sometimes similar to each other. So you have like two types of introductions generally. Those that lend themselves more to accidents and incidents because of the nature of those situations, and then those that lend themselves to the activity and events because of the nature of those situations. Then, when it comes to introductions, you also have to think about, is the writer involved? If the writer is involved and the writer is a participant, the writer must name themselves in the introduction. If they're not, then you don't have to name yourself in the introduction. So, those are the kinds of things that are important when you're thinking about a report introduction. There's one more thing that I would add, and that is like a variation on the structure of that first sentence. I know when my second daughter was doing SEA, and they were practicing reports and so on, the format was on Monday, so on day, um, date, month, etc. So there's like that format. And it bothered me at that time, it really bothered me that it all began the same way. It's like every single report she wrote this on, and I kept telling her, but there are different ways to start the sentence. You don't have to start with the date. You could start with the day, the month, or you don't have to start with that. You could start with what happened. So there are different ways, and they're all grammatically correct and they're all acceptable. Over time, I realized that giving students a template actually helps them work really well, and it's a format that they can stick with and practice and even almost memorize the format, so that if you start the same way every single time, that's okay. So the examiner is only reading this one report that you've ever done. So even if they think that you've started all your reports that way, it's an acceptable format, so it's okay. To the point where I actually do create a 3 sentence template for each of the different kinds of reports. And that's what I teach my students, that 3 sentence template for the introduction, because I believe it helps establish and build that formal tone while making it absolutely certain that the student does not forget any detail. Because you'd be surprised, sometimes the student could forget the date, they might forget the location, they might forget to name somebody as a participant. So having a template to work with is really very helpful. And so when it comes to that report introduction, don't be afraid to create a template. And you want to make sure the students have that short phrase, that they remember the first paragraph is a summary of what the rest of the report has. And when I say summary, we want to look at like answering just those 4 questions. Who was involved? What happened? Where it happened? When it happened? Once you answer those questions, move on from the introduction, begin your paragraph 2. And yes, the type of report and whether the participant is involved or not would influence the introduction. So, what are you working on this week? So, the first thing thing that I want you to do, and for those who are not familiar with the schedule, my recommendation is that you have three instances of review and practice with reports each week. The first two sessions you want to work with like 20 to 30 minutes. And the last session, session three, you want to get at least an hour where the child can write a full report. So for the first session this week, what you're doing is practicing writing what happened in that short phrase. You'd be surprised how challenging it is for some students to do that. So just make sure that your child or your student can do that. This is a situation. What is the main part of that that you could put in a sentence? And you practice that. So get your hands on, some report prompts and you could work on that. And then for practice two, second session, you are looking at brainstorming the introduction. So if you have a format, then that's sweet. If you don't, you could create one and aim for three sentences, I think. Um, Four if you're including the statement of who the report is going to. Now, some people believe that, okay, as long as you have all the details, you get the marks. Yes, you get marks for having the right amount of details in terms of the content. But remember, a report is also about building and maintaining formal tone. And so putting information in a particular order is very useful for building and maintaining that formal tone. And that's why I'm recommending those three sentences. If you don't already have an idea of that format, then I do have the five reports booklets. It's a digital series. You can get, I do go into lots of details with that, but I'll tell you about that in a little bit. Um, so here's what we're doing this week: practicing summarizing that phrase, what happened, making sure it's clear, practicing brainstorming the introduction, all the details that go into the introduction, and then you're writing a full report. When you do the report planning, it helps students really organize their ideas. And the thing is, in the actual exam, if they have a practice test or they get reports for the exam, chances are the student is not going to be able to write out everything. So there are a few shortcuts in terms of getting that report plan clear. I recommend still planning, but reducing the planning time. And so students have to really practice that to get their planning time down to 5 minutes or less. And part of that is not necessarily planning your introduction because you have that template, and the minute you see the prompt, you make one or two notes, you have that template memorized. Sentence one has this, sentence two has that, sentence three has this, sentence four has that, and you write it exactly. It really shortens the amount of time students will take with planning and actually writing the report. So practicing that is important. So here's what I have in terms of the reports. You get lots of different prompts and practice. With the first one, which is the five reports challenge, in addition to three prompts for each type of report, and there are six in this one because I included something on natural disasters. Not that I think you would get natural disasters in a report prompt for SEA, but it's good to sort of go through the process because some of those details could be used in other prompts and in other responses. So there are six types in these booklets and three prompts each, which would be six threes are 18 prompts. And you get a sample report for each of those. So you have six sample reports and six worksheets to go through and some details on the planning section. So I go into lots of detail, as in paragraph one, this is what you put in. Paragraph two, this is what you put in. This is an example of three sentence paragraph four reports, and so on. So lots and lots of details in this worksheet. It's $135 and it is digital. So once payment clears to my account, I email it to you. You can use most of it online. You might just want to print the page with the prompts so that the student can write on their own writing paper. I do give a template for the response, but you don't even have to use that. You can just print the one page, but you have all the content and all the other information. This other one here is a new worksheet that I'm I'm making available. This one is $75. Here you get 25 worksheets plus notes. Well, 25, yes, 25 because there are types of reports. So this one I don't include the natural disasters. So you have 5 prompts, 3 full worksheets each, that's 15, and then 2 short worksheets for quick planning of reports each. So altogether, you get 5 prompts, 5 worksheets for each type of report. And in addition to that, I do go through how to complete it. There's a summary sheet where you time the student. There's notes on what goes into the introduction, the 5 paragraph format for each type of report. So lots of really good information there. If you're not interested necessarily in getting samples, you can get this one and this do the practice planning drills. Because what happens with the practice, and there's an entire section explaining how the planning practice helps students organize their thoughts, organize their ideas, and be able to look at a prompt and analyze it really quickly afterward and put details into the 5 paragraph structure. So there's like 2 or 3 pages of explanation on that. So you know how to use it and how the worksheet benefits the student. The ultimate benefit is going through the content. And so you really want students to understand one of the challenges students have beyond the introduction is to make sure they have enough content in each section. And so doing planning drills helps them, really practice getting enough content in each section. All right, so those are the resources for reports. And just a quick check back. This is what you're doing this week. Practicing getting that phrase, brainstorming the introduction, and then you're writing at least one full report implementing all of these strategies that you worked on. Okay, so now we're moving on to the narrative introduction, which is a whole different ballgame from report introductions. Narrative introductions have a little bit more happening, and this is what you really want to have in the narrative introduction. These points must be included. And the thing about it is that even though the introduction in that story is the first paragraph and it's like the beginning of the story, you don't want to start students discussing narratives and writing introductions right away. Now, you notice that we're in September and we're just starting on putting it all together with that story paragraph 1, the introduction. But we started this series in April. Now, the reason that we don't start with the introduction, even though the introduction is the beginning, is simply because if you look at what needs to come in here, you realize that students need a little bit of foundation. They need to know about character description and have some practice with that. They need to know about setting description and have some practice with that. They need to know about giving background information, why a character is where they are and what the character wants. So there are some foundation concepts that need to be discussed before you get to the introduction. But when you get to the introduction, this is what you're aiming for. Now we're getting the reader's attention with a hook. So that very first sentence. And if it is that you want to be technical with it, you can create a 5 sentence introduction following exactly what these points are. So you give your hook, you introduce the character in one sentence, then you introduce the setting, then you say why the characters are where they are, then you say what the main character really wants. You can practice that. Um, it's just one way of doing things. You can get all of that in three sentences instead of just the one, because you can have your hook, you can group these two ideas, what introduce the main character and the setting, so have the main character interact with the setting, and then have them give some responses, different things, and then you could say why the character is where they are and what they want in one sentence. So anywhere from 3 to 5 sentences would be suitable for that first paragraph. And of course, this is one of the things that I teach my students. And as we're doing the drills, we'll be reviewing these things, and I'll be giving tips and strategies for working with it. Um, when it comes to getting the reader's attention with that first sentence, I know the first sentence, we have some templates and different things. I don't really advocate using like a memorized sentence, because what I've seen, I can always tell when a student writes a sentence and comes up with the idea themselves, or if they're taking words and phrases or the entire complete sentence. What happens is that, everybody has their own writing voice, right? And what happens is that when you take a full sentence from somewhere else, you're taking that writer's voice. And if it's not similar to your own, you can actually see it's like chalk and cheese. You have this one sentence written with all these wonderful descriptions and everything. And then the second sentence, which is supposed to be a continuation of the introduction, ends up being almost like a new beginning, a new introduction. It feels so different, like if it's not even in the same essay. So you really want to get students to create their own. And in creating their own, you can give them a template. Now, this is one example. I usually give my students 2 to 3 different templates that they can choose from and mix and match. And so you put this and this in the sentence, this is how you join it, and that kind of thing. um but I'm not giving them the exact words, because coming up with the words themselves is what's going to make that introduction, that first sentence, that hook, blend with the rest of the paragraph and fit what they're writing about. And so we don't want to have the one bright and sunny day introduction anymore. This would have been appropriate for maybe standard one or standard two, barely standard two, because by standard two, we're starting to move away from these things. But we're getting into more descriptive and detailed types of hooks. And so we want to add the description. So it was bright and sunny. What makes it bright? How exactly is it sunny? What does that look like? What does that feel like? You want to get into those kinds of descriptions. So instead of one bright and sunny day, you might want to say the sun blazed high in the cloudless sky as rivers of sweat poured down my face. That is way more descriptive, and you getting some like reaction and emotions coming through, because the reader is going to be thinking cloudless sky, so there are no clouds, no shade, and it's high in the sky, so it's probably about midday. So we get lots of details in this. And then with the rivers of sweat pouring down, we get some figurative language. We get descriptive language in terms of the metaphor and so on. And so, right from the beginning, that hook is engaging. One bright and sunny day sounds like, you're telling a fairy tale, and it's not necessarily, you're not starting with any kind of excitement. The sun blazed, we have that vivid verb. Cloudless sky. We have that adjective that gives a picture of what we're seeing. Rivers of sweat. We have movement. We have with the poet as well. So we have movement. We have the metaphor. We have some visualization. And immediately, readers are going to be thinking about what is happening? What is causing this? Why is it, what they're doing outside in this heat? And I mean, guys, these days, the heat has been so unbearable. I say a prayer for anybody who doesn't have AC in their car and they have to drive about during the day. I say a prayer for students who have to sit in a classroom with no fan or AC. That is like torture. So, with that experience of the heat that we're having and the heat wave all over the world, it's not just in Trinidad, it's all over the world. So descriptions of the heat is going to immediately cause the reader to connect with a time when they felt really hot and bothered and tired and just sweat everywhere and that kind of thing. So you get that emotional connection. So there's a template built in there. So you can identify. Normally, I tell students add a little bit more. This is just one example of one of the templates that you could use. There are others where you use certain phrases to connect the ideas, but you have that flexibility of adding in ideas that work with whatever the situation is and are creative at the time of the writing. So think about that hook that you're going to be using to get the reader's attention. But of course, you want to make sure that your introduction has all of these things in it, not just the hook. So after the hook, what comes next? How do you join the hook with the rest of the paragraph? These are things that students need to practice and learn. So the other thing with the introduction and that first paragraph has to do with when the conflict begins. I know that the conflict could begin in that first paragraph when you do things like flashback and so on. You could just start with the drama right away and so on. There are strategies, but the feel of the story should be that your introduction covers background information, context, and provide readers with a starting point. So when I say make sure conflict begins in paragraph 2, I mean the driving and the development of the story. The complication is what I call it in the 12-point plot. You want that to be in paragraph 2, not because it can't go in paragraph 1 and not because there are different, there's only one way to begin. It simply is because, remember, people, this is an exam, and you want to have a format that a student who is learning about writing and practicing things, you want to have a format that they can follow so that they can do things quickly, get all the details, and get all the other things. Remember, narratives have character, setting, and setting has time and place. Characters have physical, they have emotions, they have all those things. So the student is really managing a lot. So you want to give them a structure that they could say, okay, now I know I have to do this, 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 and this, and they have a checklist and they can move swiftly to finish and complete this story within the time frame in exam context, right? So please have the conflict begin in paragraph 2. Your introduction should be paragraph 1 alone. Complication begins in paragraph 2. If you are still explaining what's happening in the rest of in the introduction and you're building up paragraph 2, you're still building paragraph 3 is when you now start to get into things, that's too late. You're working with flash fiction. Those of you who have been following the series, you've heard that term before. Those of you who are new, go back into the archive. There's a video there explaining it. You can check the topics. So the idea is that we want to get things going quickly, but we have to give a foundation in the paragraph one. And so we give the foundation in the paragraph one, 3 to 5 sentences, and then we hit paragraph two with the drama beginning to unfold. Even if you're using flashback, that's how it's meant to be because flashback is a certain format. Now, again, this is not something that I could get into a whole lot of details in the live, but it's something that I am working on materials to help explain, so that I'll be having worksheets out soon. And also, this is definitely something that I teach my students when we go through the drills and with the standard 4 class when we look at different types of introductions. So, what are you doing this week? You want to practice writing hooks. And when I say practice writing hooks, most people, yes, the hook is that first sentence, but in your practice, you want to include that second sentence. So get the hook done in the first sentence and practice the second sentence to see how the hook is going to blend with the rest of the paragraph. How are you connecting what information you provided in the hook with the rest of the paragraph? That second sentence is important. So, yes, you're practicing with hooks, but you're also practicing that second sentence. And then for your second session, you want to work on a template of sorts for the introduction. Now, you could go as detailed as, okay, this is what you put in sentence one, sentence two, and sentence three. But I mean that it's a starting point, and I do give my students that kind of structure, but there's always that flexibility so that the student can add in their own effectiveness, their own details, their own creativity into the introduction. That is absolutely important for the student to, trust the student with writing the story, but give them the skills and tools that they need. And then finally, of course, session three, you want to write a complete narrative where you do the introduction and blend it with the story, rest of the story, starting the conflict in paragraph two. So that's what you're working on this week. What do I have that can help you? Um, the flashcards and materials on the plot. Now, I know generally a lot of people believe that they understand the plot and they know how to put the plot together, but I can tell you, I start all my classes with a look at plot. So this evening, when I start with the standard fours, after we do the introductions, we will talk about plot a little bit, and next week we're going to be doing um, the actual experiment and really delving into plot and plot structure. And so, in actuality, I include for the standard fours, I include a copy of this flashcard and poster combination because students absolutely need to be able to see and memorize the plot. Plot makes more of a difference than people realize. You can have students with who can do lots of awesome descriptions, but because they're not getting the plot effectively done, then the story is not going to feel complete. It's not going to be complete and it's going to be missing details and it will miss the mark. So if you want to get a copy of this, message me. It comes with a step-by-step breakdown. So there's videos, there's worksheets, all to make sure that students really get the plot clear. Because I'll tell you what, when it comes to quick planning and finishing a story really well done in the shortest space of time within the shortest amount of writing, that would be like a page and a half roughly. You need to have plot memorized inside out and know how to effectively do it. So it might feel like, oh, that's just flashcards and whatnot, but it's a foundation. I teach in all my classes. If you don't already have a copy of these posters, you need to get one. Get the poster, get the flashcard so that you could do the drills, do the memorization of the plot. It is worth it because I spend most of my time reminding students of plot. And once they understand the plot, they will be able to know where and when to give character descriptions, where and when to give the setting descriptions, how to begin and end. All of that is involved in plot. So I actually spent, I think, 2 to 3 sessions discussing plot. So that would be like maybe sessions 2 to 5. You can check the earlier episodes of Journey to SEA 2025. Plot is not important. So if you can, definitely get a copy of the 12 point because it kind of goes into details. It's not the only plot structure, but it's the basic, it's the foundation, and it really helps. If you want to get sample stories, plus a bit of information on the 12 point because I have included it in that as well. There's a document there that you could probably just print out that page too. But take what I'm telling you, having that poster up where they're studying makes a difference. But in this one, we get details about descriptions, sample stories. There are 7 types of stories that I recommend students know how to do: realistic fiction, science fiction, folklore, fairy tale, fantasy, um, action and adventure, thriller and suspense, and mystery. So you get a sample of each one of those types of stories where students could see how the character description is done and all those different things, what to focus on, how to analyze a prompt for the SEA story telling, all of those details in that. And again, it's digital so that you could, as soon as the funds clear in my account, you can get a copy, right? But you need to have something to work with. If you can get samples in other places, if you could get plot development in the kind of detail that you need somewhere else, make sure you have those kinds of materials because that's what you're going to need this week covering that because like I said, plot is foundation. All right. So let's move on to comprehension. And for comprehension, what we're looking at this week is words and meaning. We have done a little bit on context clues, where I went through with you different types of context clues. There are about 8, 9, depending on who you ask. The whole point of context clues is understanding vocabulary, words, and meaning in readings, in context, in situations where the reading is you're reading this for the first time and this is a word that you don't know. Could also be a word that you're familiar with, but it's used differently from the way that you're accustomed to seeing it. So the idea is that we're trying to decipher words and meaning, how words are used, and how we can get meaning from those words within the context. So here's what paying attention to that is all about. You're trying to figure out the words and meaning. So you need to pay attention to the known words in the sentence because it's going to be very unlikely that a child will encounter a sentence where they don't know any word. They will know words, even if it's just like the conjunctions. They know and, they know the, and articles like and etc. They would know some of the words in the sentence. So if there's a word that you don't know, the first thing that you do when you read the sentence is think about the words that you do know. Do they give you a hint about what this unknown word can mean? Then you want to consider the author and the tone of the text. So, what is the author really trying to tell you here? Because, of course, this is an exam, but all reading, somebody wrote this, and so they're telling you something. And so, how, what are they telling you? In general, minus the word that you don't know, what is the sentiment? What is the idea? What is the feeling that's happening here? So we have tone. I should have probably put mood as well if it is like a narrative or a poem in particular. Like how does it make you feel? Um, and like in terms of the details, what are the known words? What do you know? And how does it make you feel? What do you think the writer is trying to tell you? And this is what you want to really start with when you're trying to figure out meaning. And then you want to exercise critical and creative thinking. Now, a lot of times we think about critical thinking for math and we think about creative thinking for the, you know, descriptive writing. Critical and creative thinking apply to everything. And when it comes to understanding words and what they mean in context, students need to apply critical and creative thinking. And so they learn that throughout in lots of different things that they do and not just one or two things. For example, if you've been following this series, you may have heard me say that when students are writing reports and narratives, they have to apply a significant amount of critical and creative thinking. Critical thinking in terms of analyzing prompts and deciding what to include, creative thinking in terms of coming up with the ideas. So there is critical and creative thinking throughout. Now, in this case, I'm talking about critical and creative thinking with words and understanding words and what they mean and how to use them. So you really want to have students kind of exploring words and not feeling intimidated by language. And so when we're looking at exercising critical and creative thinking, you want to think about, exposing students to a lot of reading where there may be words that they don't know. So you don't want a student to meet a word that they don't know and feel anxious or intimidated or distressed to the point where they shut down or they can't figure out the rest of it because, oh goodness, I don't know this word. If I don't know this word, how can I answer the whole thing? There are strategies around it. Sometimes you don't even need to know the word to get a question answered. And this is something that I do with my comprehension students. When we go through the comprehension past papers, we do unique exercises as well. Um, the first three questions in any comprehension, once it's structured according to exam protocol, which means that we start with literal and then we move on to the um, infer- inferential and evaluative analytical. So once a comprehension passage and the questions are formatted according to exam protocol where they build like that, you should be able to answer the first three questions with a quick scan of the text, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, poem, or graphic. With a quick scan, you should be able to answer the first two to three questions. And whether or not you've read the whole thing, you should be able to get those details. So I go through that exercise with the students so that they can see, guess what? You don't have to know everything in order to answer a question. Now, of course, if it's a vocabulary question, then you need to know the vocabulary and how it's used, but you can get lots of hints with how the sentence has been given, what sentences came before and after, and really look at the overall context using critical and creative thinking. But guess what? This is something that students need to practice. Now, of course, you tell them that and they go through the comprehension, but they need to practice that in other ways as well. And so for your session one, you want to read and discuss um, literature with students, especially poems. And I came across this pretty awesome site that has lots of different um, poems for kids There's one that when I read it first, I'm like, but this has a typographical error. That what kind of thing is this? And then I realized it was kind of deliberately done. The whole thing was really interesting. So I'm looking for, where is it? Oh, I think I closed it off. But I'll put it in the chat when I find it. Yeah, how could I close this off? And I really wanted to share it with you. Oh man. All right. Let me just do a quick look at my history. Uh, yeah, to find it. But in any case, you want to do some reading and you want to like discuss. So you don't necessarily need to like just send the child off to read. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about in general um, building students reading, which this is part of that, but that's not the focus this time around. The focus this time around is really to understand the the way words work. I mean, I guess that's the best way that I could see it. I was looking for, some more profound ways of expressions, but that's pretty much what it comes down to. Um, Describing how the words work, and students need to see that in context and recognize how the words work. And so, especially poems, you don't want students to feel intimidated by poems. So, you want to read a variety of poems. Now, this particular site, poetryforkids.com, has a lot of poems about different topics. Most of them rhyme, and most of them are the kind of, you know, happy, funny kind of poems that students can engage with. And so I found the one that I was looking for. Um, Let me stop the share with that. And I'm going to share that page with the poem. Let me put that over here so I could see it. Yeah, and you'd see what I mean when I said, well, I read it and I was like, what? And then I realized the whole point of the poem, which made me chuckle. And I think it might have students, it's definitely a discussion point. For sure, for sure, for sure. It's a discussion point with the poem and getting students to kind of really think about poetry in a fun and interesting way and not just feel like I have to analyze this distress with it. We really want to have them kind of approach it in a more fun way. And right, so here's the poem. And what I like about this is that you could listen to it as well. I don't know if you can hear um when share. Let me see. I'm gonna stop share and then share again to see if we get the audio. All right, so hopefully you're hearing it. If not, you can go to the link and you can listen to it. So you don't actually have to read it. You can hear the poem itself, and it's just about a minute, so I could play the whole thing. Um, so I'm hoping that you're hearing it. Just give me a thumbs up if you're hearing it. Yeah, it just made me like when I figured it out like about um around here. Well, when they began with slee, I realized, okay, no, that's not a typo. It's not a mistake. It was deliberately done. And so I felt it was really, really funny. So since the audio probably didn't share, hopefully you had some time to read it. I'm gonna just read it out loud. Like I said, it's just a minute. This afternoon I met a sloth. It didn't purr, it didn't bark. Instead, it slobbered on my toes, then slithered up and slooped my nose. So, and again, we have the gross factor. Like, ew, mess. It's really an engaging poem just to get students talking and thinking about how words work, so that even though some of these words are we have the extra l and so on, this is a really good point to start talking about how do you know what it means with the extra l in it. It's not an actual word. How do you figure out what it means? And so you get that. C. Slacks are sort of sloppy slugs that slubber slime on shoes and rugs. They like to slink and slip and slide and slither slowly up your side. If you dislike the slimy marks of sliding, slinking, sloppy slacks, then I suggest you stay in slide, and if you slee one, run and hide. Slee, slimy slacks are sort of sly. One sloked me in slime supply and left me slobbing in the dark. It seems that soon I'll be a slack. Now, I had to practice saying that with a straight face because it's like the dumbest thing. But that's the beauty of poetry, it's so fun. So you have this link. You have that website that you could check, but again, this is what you want to be doing, people. You don't want to just have the only time a student encounters poetry is when they have an exam to do. You don't want that the only time they enjoy poetry is when they have an exam to do, which is no kind of enjoyment with poetry, to be honest, right? And so that's what so you have that, and this is what you could work with, I think. Really do some reading. So read all different kinds of reading. Yeah? Read fiction, read nonfiction, read poetry. Take a look at graphics, just randomly in general. But of course, you have a purpose. You're not necessarily telling the child, hey, come, let's look at this for the purpose of understanding poetry comprehension. It's like, you wouldn't believe what I found today. Look at this silly poem. And then read it for them, and everybody laughs. And it's like, oh, how? And then bring up the topics and the discussion. Um, because here, you see this? You want to have fun exploring words. And then by the end of it, then you want to complete a comprehension task. So you might want to do a poem or fiction, nonfiction, but just do one. Nothing so intensive that it'll feel a whole lot like work. Just do one. And so this is the resource that I have. I have two versions of this. This one is package one, and I also have a package two with ABLE words. This one has FLE and PLE words. But the beauty about this is that it includes reading. So if you're wondering, okay, what to read, this FLE one has fiction. The other one, I think, has a fiction and nonfiction. And I'm also going to do some with poems and different things. So you have a variety of reading material. Um, and then we explore the words. So we have the definitions of the words in question. So there are 10 words per package overall. But because we do synonyms and antonyms, and we provide two synonyms and two antonyms, as examples for each word, how many is that? So two synonyms for 10 words, that's 20 synonyms, 20 antonyms, and plus the 10 words. So altogether, you're really getting about 50 words here in the package. So 10 we're focusing on because we're exploring those, but we also have that other 40 with the synonyms and the antonyms, and then whatever else other words students might themselves come up with, because we have activities where they have to do some things themselves, then you're expanding vocabulary. So you're starting with 10, but really and truly, you're getting into at least 50 altogether. And then we have practical hands-on activities, and then a culmination activity, sometimes called extension activity. I think that's what I labeled it in there. Um, and that extension activity in this one, it's creating, I think it's pineapple chow or mango chow, or it's a process. So you get to talk about the process that the students can follow, how they do things differently, and really just engage with language. So I don't know if you've been following this series, if you've ever heard me mention this before, but when it comes to vocabulary and learning vocabulary, there's something called, oh, the term just slipped me. Just, oh, it came and it went. Um, it's about words in context. It's dealing with, oh, yeah, I'm over my time of an hour, and I think that's my limit too. When I remember the term, I'll put it in the chat for you. But it's a viewpoint of looking at words in context, yes, but actually exploring the word itself, where the origin of the word, perhaps how the words are used, how it's pronounced, if the student likes the sound of the word or not. Consciousness, that's it. Woo, thank you. Word consciousness. So if you haven't heard the term before, you can go look it up, word consciousness. And it's a really fascinating view of understanding and building and maintaining, that development of vocabulary. And so that is what this is based on, this philosophy of word consciousness. Students have artwork to do. They create their own picture dictionary. That's one of the activities, and so on. And so you really get into a lot with this. So yes, it's like 5 FLE and 5 PLE words, and you might be thinking, but here's what, like I said, you get at least 50 words because you get two synonyms and two antonyms in addition to whatever other words the student develops. And you have a really fun and interesting way to discover and explore words, plus the two comprehension passages that you get to read. One is just reading for fun, and the other one actually has like 7 questions associated with it. You can create your own questions for the one that's read for fun. Although I don't recommend it, just read it for fun. Generate questions and chat. Don't do the writing thing. But so yeah, so these are the materials that we have. And so now that brings us down to the end. So I'm really excited that I am getting the time to create more materials. I have some outstanding materials for some students that I'm going to be sending hopefully by the end of this week. And I thank you, please, and prayers for the patience. Um, but I'm happy that I'm able to create these materials because I understand that I could share everything, a teacher could share everything, but if you don't have the practice and the quality kind of practice that you need to work with your students, the worksheets and so on, it's not going to be as effective with the reinforcement. So with narratives, we looked at that introduction format, the hook in particular, blending the hook with the rest of the paragraph. For the reports, you're considering a 3 sentence format. And then for words and meaning, you're considering exploring the concept of words and how they're used, how you can have fun with them, and you're reading to get a lot of this understanding. All right. So thank you so, so much for those of you. I did go over the time. It's almost 10 past the hour. But I did. I really wanted to get in all of these details for you. So next week we're going to be continuing with the introductions, some more, and a little bit more on context and so on. Check your schedules and see what's next. And I'll definitely send you a reminder. But I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. So thank you so much. And let's do the stop share. And I'll see you next week. All right. Bye bye, everybody. Time for the exit video. Take care.